I'm dwfearn, and this is my take on music recording. In this third and final part of my conversation with singer-songwriter Corrie Lynn Green, we deviate somewhat from the technology of the studio and discuss the role of the producer. What do you think the role of a producer is in recording?
In my experience, the role of the producer is to be the objective listener and to, I think, even come up with ideas when the producer hears the group playing together and coming up with ideas of how we want it to sound, to sort of interject if something could sound better, if something needs to be changed, or if it just doesn't sound right, and to sometimes offer suggestions of something we may not have thought of. Just to be the ultimate listener, I think, is the job of the producer. And yeah, sometimes helping the band or the musicians that are playing together get into a good flow. I mean, I think making us all feel comfortable is actually a really important part of it. Maybe even getting musicians together that are going to be really comfortable together if you're not typically playing together. Maybe maintaining the overall emotion and feeling that the songs originally had, sort of holding that line. Yeah, and then pushing us a little bit to get the very best out of our vocals. I think in the case of you producing, it's been also gently helping me know, like when I'm straining vocally, how to back off. Or, yeah, if we haven't hit a note right. I mean, we generally know it, but there'll be a gentle way of sort of saying, let's do it again. And I also think pushing it right to the limit of how far we can go. And I guess that's my answer to that.
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty good. I always think of the producer's role as being like the director of a movie.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people in a movie. You've got a lot of people doing specialized jobs.
Yes.
Generally speaking, a producer in music is pretty much by himself, but he may have engineers, that work with him. For me, it's just more direct for me to do the engineering at the same time.
Yeah.
Just because I know how I want it to go.
Yeah.
But when we have Ian involved, who's really good at stuff, once we get set up and everything, I often let him handle the mechanics of it.
Yes.
So I'm not distracted by that. So I can just listen to it. And everybody's different. I mean, there's some producers that have an iron fist over everything.
Right.
And that's a legitimate way.
Yeah.
And you have other producers that just, they'll just sit there and say, that sounds great to me.
Right.
And their job is mainly to just make sure things keep moving forward.
Okay, yeah.
And that's legitimate too. For me, I don't want to interfere with the artist's music.
Right.
But I do want to help them to make it as good as can possibly be. So, starting from the fundamental thing of like, what songs are we going to do? We, for your album, I think we had like 30 some songs to choose from.
Yes.
So we had to go through and pick out what were the ones we wanted to do. Some were obvious, some were, it could have gone a lot of different ways.
Yes.
So at some point, and this is collaborative. It's not my decision.
Yes.
It's both of us.
Yeah.
Deciding which songs we're going to do.
Right.
And then who are we going to get to play on them? What instruments do we need? Who are the best people to do that? And it may even include things like the structure of the song. The way you perform it solo doesn't have any room for a break for somebody else to do a solo, guitar solo or, or even cello solo or whatever.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out, where do they go?
Yeah.
What's the best way to do that?
Yeah.
So all that occurs before you ever get to the studio.
Right.
I mean, we may be sitting in the studio, but we're not recording. We're
Right.
just figuring this stuff
Right.
out.
Right.
And then when we get all the best people we can into the room, I have to make sure that they have everything they need ahead of time.
Right.
Which means the demo of the song, the best demo that's going to hopefully be the structure that we're going to be using for the recording.
Yeah.
In the key and the tempo.
Right.
And everything, so that when they listen to it, they're hearing, exactly what it's going to be.
Yeah.
In theory.
Right.
So that they can be thinking about how their part fits in there. And then chord sheets, lyric sheets, whatever they need so that they have something they can look at before, after a while they know the songs. But initially, they don't remember. And who would expect them to, the structure of the song.
Right.
Especially that your songs sometimes have some surprises.
Lots of them.
So things pop up where you don't really expect them.
Yes.
Or you'll do, a half chorus here and then a full chorus there and stuff like that, which, makes your music great. But it's confusing to people if they don't have, an outline of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then we just sit around here, and it turns out everybody likes sitting on the floor when we do this.
That's true.
I don't know why.
That's where we end up.
Yeah. And, you play the song, and everybody sort of starts playing in with you.
Yep.
And then somebody will come up with an idea, and everybody will say, that's great. We'll say, well, let's do that. Mm-hmm. Or on occasion, and less frequently, somebody will come up with a part and we'll just say, no, that doesn't fit. You have to do that in a way that's gentle to the person, because it may be really important to them that they thought this was the right thing.
Right.
And that may be just because they don't really understand the song yet.
Yeah, right.
So somebody has to be there to sort of have that overview.
I agree.
To say that doesn't really fit this song. I'm saying it bluntly now. I wouldn't say it that way with the people. And also recognizing when they do something really, really good.
Yes.
Saying, wait a minute, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we get that in there.
Yeah.
Because those things are ephemeral. They could be, they played it once, and if somebody doesn't pay any attention, they'll never do it again.
Yeah, right.
So we have to capture those things.
Yeah.
And we do because for us, we don't have the time to have a rehearsal.
Right.
Normally, in an ideal situation, we'd have, at least one rehearsal session for each song that we could work out a lot of this stuff. But we don't have that option. We have to figure this all out and then record it at the same time. And usually we do, 3 songs in a session. So it's a lot of pressure. Figuring out all that stuff is, I think, really important part of the producer's role.
Agreed. Yeah.
And then once we get ready to do the actual recording, for me, I already have a pretty good idea of where I'm going to put people in the room and what microphones I'm going to use.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, too. I mean, that could be viewed strictly as an engineering thing.
Right.
But sometimes I think engineers are working for their optimum situation and not necessarily the music's optimum situation.
Sure.
So I always make sure I specify that ahead of time so that I know where everybody's going to be, because there's lots of things to consider. There's that isolation thing that we talked about, but there's also eye contact because that can be really important.
Yes.
Especially for somebody that's, just really learning this song.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure the people that need to see each other can see each other.
Yes.
Which is a problem with you because you're in another room.
Right.
But that doesn't seem to affect things too much.
Yeah, it seems okay for me. I don't know why, but it does seem okay. I mean, I do know the feeling of and how important eye contact can be when I'm playing on stage with people because there's a communication there. But I think the players we have here, they're able to see each other, and I know the song so well. So it's really just about listening, and I sort of feel like I'm in the room, even with the headphones. So
yeah, good. From that stage, going into the actual recording of the song, we'll get everybody in position, and I'll adjust mics, or Ian will adjust mics. He's really good at that, so I usually just leave that up to him.
yes.
You know, he does things that I probably wouldn't do, but work really well. So I really rely on his judgment and experience on those things to come up with the right solution.
Yeah.
But it might not be the right solution. You know, it might be my solution wasn't right, or his solution wasn't right. So at that stage, when everybody's playing the song now and getting more comfortable in their positions, there's still a lot going on because we have to make sure that we're capturing things in the way, you know, that's in my mind of how I want it to sound.
Yeah.
You know, and if there's any technical problems, how do we solve those?
Right.
You know, and that's mostly isolation and things like that. And
Yeah.
and just the sound of it.
Yeah.
It's like, is that guitar sound really right for this song?
Yeah.
You know, do we need to change the mics on that guitar?
Yeah.
And so I've used different mics on Adam's guitar just because some songs needed one kind of a sound and other songs needed a different one.
Yeah.
And then we get into the situation where we're ready to record. And I always start recording right from the beginning, even when they're still working out parts. But if they're in position in front of microphones,
Yeah.
I record. It used to be in the days of tape, that wasn't really practical.
Right.
You could always go back and
Right.
erase it and go over it, but tape was like so expensive that you just didn't have that luxury.
Right.
And you only had 30 minutes on a reel, so it meant that you had to make sure that if you were on a roll and you almost got it, you didn't run out of tape.
Oh, yeah, right.
You know, so you had to make decisions along the way. Keep that one or don't keep that one.
Right.
You know, with digital, we don't have that restriction. We can record everything. And so I do. And although we probably will never listen to it, it'll never be heard again forever, it's valuable.
Yeah.
So once we get, everybody knows the song and we record a complete version of it, then I want everybody to come in and listen. And that serves multiple purposes.
Yep.
You know, first of all, if it sounds really good, it energizes people.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that, you know, we keep the energy up, the enthusiasm up by, you know, capturing them the best possible way. Also, they can hear much better how their part fits in with the other parts.
Yes.
Because now they're hearing it in a more objective way.
Yeah.
Right? And so oftentimes I don't have to say a word because they'll come in, they'll listen, and they'll know exactly what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But it just depends on the player. Some players you may have to say, you know, this isn't, you know, gently again, but just this isn't the right part. Let's see if we can come up with something better.
Although my experience was, yes, the first way, that we're all listening to our own individual parts together in the room, and you suddenly hear your mistakes and you hear the things that doesn't quite sound right, and you immediately know how to adjust it, and you go back in and get that done.
Right.
All on your own.
Yeah. And for most of the sessions I do, that's the case because I want to work with really good people and they just know how to do that.
Yeah.
That's not always the case, though. You may have situations where you do have to provide a little bit more direction that way.
Right.
You know, generally that first take is not going to be used for anything, but that it is valuable for everybody to listen to that.
Sure.
And then we'll start taking the song in earnest, you know, and trying to get a really good performance.
Yeah.
And generally, that first run through is a little tentative, there may be mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, people are still trying to feel their way through the song.
You're warming up.
Right. So that may take 2 or 3 or 4 times through until people get to that stage where they feel like, okay, I understand this song now. I know what my part is. I can focus on being part of this music.
Yeah.
And that's really an important decision point for the producer, because you don't want to do take after take after take, because you reach a peak and then it starts going downhill.
Right.
And it can go downhill real fast.
Right.
Because people get bored with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the excitement anymore.
Yeah.
So often a producer has to make a decision that we're going to use take 4.
Okay.
And take 3 technically might have been better.
Yeah.
Because everybody was really focused and they weren't quite as relaxed, but it didn't have the right feel.
Right.
And music is a feel thing. It's not a technical thing.
Yep.
So it's got to feel right, and somebody has to make the decision on what feels right.
Right.
Ultimately. And for me, it's almost always a group decision.
Right.
So I want to hear everybody's input on it. How did that feel to you?
Right.
How did you feel about your performance?
Yep.
I find that on the sessions we do, it's sort of a non-issue. I think everybody sort of realizes at the same time when we were there.
Yeah.
So that's pretty easy, but not all sessions are that way.
Yeah.
I mean, some sessions it's going to require 20 takes to get it right.
Yeah.
And there's some performers in some situations who can do 20 takes, and the 20th take is like 10 times better than the 10th take.
Right.
Not only technically, but in the feel. But I don't think that applies to most people. That's kind of the exception.
Yeah.
There's a point where you have to decide that that's the right one. And you mentioned this, and I think I'm glad you did, because I think it's a really important part of it is you have to make the session comfortable for people.
Yeah.
Because if there's tension in the session, people aren't going to play their best.
Yeah. So true.
And it's just not fun for anybody.
It's not fun. Right.
Right. And if it's not fun, you're not going to get good music.
That's right.
I mean, unless you're looking, some music that might be true.
Right.
You don't
Right.
want it to be fun.
Yeah.
But even the most serious music can be fun.
It can be fun to be creating it.
Right.
And you have to be comfortable to do that.
Right. I've talked about this in an episode recently, but just to reiterate, that can range from how comfortable is the room? Is the temperature right? Humidity right? Is the lighting right?
Yeah.
Is everybody comfortable in their position in the chair they're sitting on?
That's right.
Are the microphones like making them feel cramped and uncomfortable?
Right.
Can you fix that for them?
Yeah.
Does everybody have a bottle of water or a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
All those things are sort of this background stuff that's going on all the time.
Yeah.
For me, anyway, as a producer, in making sure that everything's optimum for people.
Yep.
Some things are out of your control, but the things that you can control, you should try to do it, but never make it obvious.
Right.
Right? I try not to.
Yeah.
To just anticipate what they need and make sure they have it.
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot of times people aren't aware of it.
Yeah.
Somebody's got their music because they still need that to, for the structure of the song or whatever. And wherever the music stand's set up is uncomfortable for them to turn their head to see that.
Yeah.
And if you're observing what's going on in the studio, I'll say, Ian, move that music stand so he's more comfortable.
Yeah.
And Ian, he understands that perfectly. So
Yeah.
he knows exactly what to do. And the headphones, all those things that make things go properly.
Right.
I think those are all
Really
producers'
important.
job.
Yeah.
And one of those things to make people comfortable is know when to take a break.
Yeah. That's so true.
Because a lot of times musicians feel like they're on the verge of getting it just right.
Oh, yes. I feel that all the time.
You have to make the decision, is that the right approach, or are we better off taking a break?
Yeah.
Is everybody worn out? And, I mean, even if it's just a 10-minute break just to walk around, use the bathroom, drink something, whatever it takes, go outside.
Yeah.
That may be all it needs.
Yeah.
Or have we been recording for 5 hours straight and it's time to eat something?
Yes.
To get everybody's brain functioning again.
Yep. Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think most of the other roles of a producer we've sort of covered in the other things we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Does my description of that suggest anything else I missed or questions you have about it?
No, I would just say that I think you do all of those things really well. I think we are driven as musicians to get it right, so we'll just keep going until we drive ourselves crazy. And then it does seem like there's a perfectly placed break or a perfectly placed lunch or a perfectly placed cup of coffee, and those things all feel very natural. Yeah, so you're kind of the guide. You're the guide through. So it's really good. And I think there's a lot of roles that we have the luxury of not paying attention to because you're doing it subtly and well. So we just get to be totally immersed in our musical experience.
Right. Yeah, I want to provide as little distraction to you as possible.
It's great.
I want to make the whole process seem transparent, and so your whole focus is on your music, and not on anything else going on around you.
Yeah.
Well, I think there are a few other things that the producer's responsibility, and this varies, according to the situation.
Yeah.
For some people that, just brought in to produce a song for a flat fee, that may be the end of their involvement.
Right.
I don't know why it is with me, but I want to have my fingers in every aspect of it.
Yeah.
That's just the way I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to see this through and make sure that all this work we put into it is creating the optimum situation for everybody involved, and especially to make sure that we get the music out there to people. Because we can all have great recordings we'd love to listen to that we made, but if nobody else hears them, it's kind of a waste, isn't it?
I think so too. Yeah. And I think you also are really good at that. I mean, recognizing that, like, that there's a purpose. Because I do think a lot of producers, it's just the flat fee and then you have to move on to the next and the next, or you're the only one promoting yourself. And it's really helpful to have somebody who's experienced also helping you do that and pushing toward the success of the work.
Right. Well, I think in an ideal situation, we would have a bunch of experts.
Yeah. Yes.
And so when it came to promoting the record or the social media or all that kind of stuff, that, album design, the artwork, all those things, we'd have, people are really good at it that we could call on to do that.
Yeah.
At this stage, that's not really an option in a lot of cases, so we have to do it all ourselves.
Yeah. And
I think that's pretty typical of the independent artists these days.
Yeah.
That, maybe everything falls on their shoulders.
Yeah, so much.
And they may be doing all the recording themselves.
Yeah.
Every single bit of it from beginning to end.
Yeah, it's true.
But for me, I just like being part of that.
Yeah.
So once we've got the songs done and mixed, and I'm always thinking about this. This is an ongoing process, all these different paths that need to be followed to completion are not sequential. They all run in parallel. Yeah. And some become more important than others at different stages. Yeah. So, we talked about what are we going to do for an album cover.
Right.
We talked about getting somebody to design that for us, but who knows better than you and I what it should be?
Yeah, exactly.
So until we can find somebody, and afford to pay them,
right,
we do that ourselves.
Yeah.
And it may not be the best possible album jacket and photos and everything, but I think it's
still pretty darn good.
It's good. And we learned a lot doing that.
And you learn, and you know what you want.
Right. And then at that stage, the producer's job is to pay all the musicians as necessary. We're fortunate that we have really good people that do stuff for us at a much reduced rate.
Yes.
Than what they would normally get.
Yes.
Just really, because they love your music.
Yeah.
They love working with you. They love working with me.
And it makes it possible.
Right. But still, they've got to walk out the door with some money in their pocket. Because that's what they do for a living.
Yeah.
I wouldn't ask them to do it for free.
Yeah.
Even if they said they wanted to do it for
right.
free, I didn't convince them that they needed to take something.
Yes.
And then if we're going to make a CD, then there's another expense, which I think is the producer's role in this case, because we're essentially the record company.
Yes, exactly.
So that's another role. And then we can have the greatest album in the world, but if nobody hears it, there's no point. We've just wasted a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that we get people to hear this.
Yeah.
And really, you've done so much more of that than I have. But, it's something that in my role as a producer, I see as part of my responsibility is to facilitate that as much as I can.
Yeah. It's so challenging. I think everybody that's involved in a record like that has got to play some role, and maybe it's just sharing it on social media, and maybe it's just letting your friends know. Music is so hard to get heard now, and I think all of us musicians work so hard at it, and most musicians I know don't have the support that I have, having someone come in and also help do all of those things. But I never tire of hearing new music. I never tire of hearing something that really affects me musically. But I think about all the lost albums there are out there that just never get the appropriate listener's ear. And it's not from lack of talent or lack of it being interesting. It's just we live in such a different technical world, and pushing stuff out is really challenging.
Right. Well, in the old days, it was the record companies that were the gatekeepers.
Yeah, I almost think it's the same thing, right? It's like it was really hard back then, and it's really hard now. In some ways, we have more control over pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and will the world pick it up? That's a question. Back then, you didn't have any, because either the record companies would pick it up or they wouldn't, but you couldn't even hardly get into them. And I think that's true for a lot of the streaming sites now. How do you get them to even listen, to pick it up? Same idea. There's a gatekeeper there. Hopefully musicians are going to bust through that gate and start really taking care of ourselves and doing it ourselves and listening and sharing music. I think that's all really important.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a totally different landscape than for how it existed through most of my career.
Yeah.
And so it's been a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And you've been really helpful with that, because you do the research and tell me what you've discovered.
Yeah.
In the old days, record companies determined who, no music would ever be heard if they didn't approve it.
Yeah.
And they didn't do something with it.
Yeah.
And if they were on your side, that was great.
Yeah.
They didn't pay you very much.
Right.
But at least your music got the exposure.
That's right.
So now it's a totally different thing where, you as an independent artist are the record company, essentially.
Yes.
And the promotion department and all those things. The plus side of that is that we have complete artistic control of it. So we don't have anybody telling us how to do it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a wonderful freedom.
Yes, it is.
The downside is that you're competing with a million new songs a month or whatever it is.
That's right.
And how does anybody get heard?
Yeah.
And that's really a tough situation.
Yeah.
Not one that I have a solution to.
Right.
So you just make the best music you can.
Yeah.
And
you do it because you love it either way.
Right.
And you hope for the best.
Right.
And you work at it a little bit too.
Right. Yeah. You're guaranteed it's not going to go anywhere if you don't do anything with it. So the only thing you can do is put your effort into as much as you can into making something happen.
Yeah.
And as I always say, that's a talent that's really important for anybody that wants to be successful in music, is they have to have the talent to make things happen.
Yeah.
They can't just record the thing and sit back and wait for the world to discover it, because they won't.
And be willing to really put yourself out there and promote yourself.
Right.
And say, I did this and you should listen. I mean, that's something I had to get over at some point too, where it's like, oh, I don't want to bother anyone. But yeah, because music is a gift. So they should hear it, and it's work, but it's important work.
Right. Yep. And I guess a plus side of that is that we don't have the record company taking 90% of it.
That's right.
We may have a little tiny income,
Yeah.
but it's 100% ours.
That's right. That's right.
Not 100%, but
yeah,
probably 90% ours instead of 90% theirs.
Right.
So it's a different world. I really thank you for this. Has been long, but I think we've covered a lot of things.
Yeah, me too.
Are there anything else that you can think of that we should talk about?
No, I think we covered. I think if I were the listener and in the shoes I was just in 2 years ago, 1 year ago, it's really helpful to have these things broken down in this way because they're all just processes and everybody should have access to them and be able to understand them. So I think sometimes we get so complicated that it feels overwhelming. So I think it's good for people to have an inside look at what it takes to record a song in a professional studio with a producer. And I think it gives more access and information. So I think we covered it well.
Good. Well, after all this discussion, if there's anybody out there, and I'm sure they are, that want to hear your music, how can they hear it?
They could go to my website, which is CorrieLynnGreenMusic.com, Corrie. That's how you spell my name. You can find the songs. The whole album is on Bandcamp under the same name, Corrie Lynn Green. You can find it on all streaming services as well. And we sure hope you check it out. We worked really hard on it. It's a beautiful album, and it's something really different.
Well, Corrie, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
This concludes the 3-part series on studio technology for musicians. There are plenty of additional topics that Corrie and I could discuss, and if there is sufficient interest, we can do more the next time Corrie is here for recording. To conclude this series, here is the title track from Corrie Lynn Green's album, Blow Away.
Little girl, Mama's watching you. Mama don't know what to do. Little baby girl, it's dark inside that holler. It's wild and it's deep. Fell in love with a pretty little boy when I was just 16. Crawled out the attic window, shimmied down that vine, hopped inside a pickup truck, got drunk on cherry wine. Blow away, blow away, blow away my thinking mind. Gonna have me a pretty little girl, she's gonna love me all the time. Blow away, blow away, blow away my thinking mind. Gonna have me a pretty little girl, she's gonna love me
Please let me know if you found this episode helpful, and feel free to suggest topics for this or any other area of recording that you would like to hear about. You can reach me at dwfearn@dwfearn.com. I am sure you know people who could benefit from this information. Please direct them to this podcast and share it on your social media. Thanks. This is my take on music recording. I'm Doug Fern. See you next time.